You know, I was in the Senate for a long time, 27 years. I started when I was 27 years old, the youngest guy that ever got elected until Cleo Fields came along. He was about 22 or 19 or something. I don't know how old he was, but he was a lot younger than I was. I have a degree in economics, and I started off teaching school up in a little place called Plain Dealing, Louisiana. It's a great name, Plain Dealing. Anyway, I taught there, and then I moved out to Houghton. I was in a 10-man race, got elected, ran high to the United States Senate. Not quite. The Louisiana State Senate. And I served there for 27 years. You hear about people fighting. Nobody in Louisiana has done more for people and stood up for people than I have. Not one soul. I have been a fighter for consumers. And you hear several people saying, we got to make business strong, we got to make business strong, we got to make business strong. Where's somebody talking about helping people? Helping the people a little bit. Now, I've been blessed. I have several farms. But once I had an uncle, I was a young fellow, and I loved to hunt, and I'm talking about gun control. I have 31 shotguns, and I don't want to brag about it. 7 bird dogs. I'm the guy that named the Catahoula cur dog the state dog of Louisiana, so I know all about dogs. I'm in the cattle business in 3 parishes. But I had an uncle one time, he had no hands and 1 eye. He was in an accident. And I loved to hunt, and in the wintertime, my daddy had a small business, and I'd go down to Bienville Parish, and we'd hunt. And I never will forget, there's a little place called Freiburg, Louisiana. You don't know where it is. They know where it is. It's just a little bit south of Minden. And we went in the store to buy some shells. And my uncle had a hook on his hand, and so we opened up a box of shells. Now, if you don't know about shells, Super X makes the Expert, and then they make a Super X. The Expert is the cheaper shell. The Super X is the high brass shell. So we went in there, and we opened up a box, and my uncle started counting shells with his hook. And we were getting the Expert shell. And I said, Uncle James, why are we doing this? He said, son, everybody's daddy doesn't have a hardware store. I got it. I've never forgot it. Some people have to get by like the best they can. And I've been in the legislature and I've been on the Public Service Commission fighting for people, and I'm very proud of it. I don't think you have to do everything for business. I don't think everything has to go for business, and I'm in business. I'm not against business, but sometimes businesses, corporations can be greedy, and they want it all. How many times have we heard, oh, you can't raise the minimum wage, that'll kill jobs? But I want to talk to you today about what's going on here. Louisiana is a poor state. Poverty. Nobody's talked about that up here much today. We talked about business and making sure that business gets fixed, and we do this for business. And like I told you, I'm blessed now. I'm not a poor boy. But I have a heart. I'm sick of Louisiana being the poorest state in America. Do you realize that 40% of the people who live in this great state live in poverty or are the working poor? 40%, that's 2 out of 5. Well, what are we going to talk about today? Making sure business does great and making sure they do better? How much better do they have to do to help people in Louisiana get away from being poorer than Mississippi? Now, I want somebody, maybe anybody here can answer this. I'd like for you to answer it. How in the world can we be poorer than Mississippi when we have all the oil and gas? We have 50,000 miles of pipeline. We have the refineries. We have the Gulf of Mexico. Let me give you a little example here. Just think with me. Here is the state of the United States of America. Okay, the whole picture. And you have New York, Connecticut, Washington on this side, California. All the oil that's ever been found off the coast of America, 90% of it is found off the coast of Louisiana. And what have we done? What have the politicians done? We're out tap dancing shoes, saying, oh, you can't touch them. You can't touch them. I'm worried about them leaving. Seriously, do you actually think somebody that has 50,000 miles of pipeline, the Mississippi River, all those refineries are going to pick up and leave? Of course not. You know our problem? Tap dancing politicians. That's the truth. And I hadn't been a tap dancing politician. But what tap dancing brings to you is poor folks. Now, of course they give us jobs. Well, who you think's going to, I mean, they have to have people. We have a trained workforce. I'm all for that. You know, I was amazed that we had this BP blowout. Oh, it was terrible. And it is terrible. A lot of lawyers are suing BP, going to get a lot of money out of it. I know all about it. That's fine. A lot of damage. Where have all the politicians gone? No, you know, I asked Mr. Nungesser, I wrote him a letter. I saw him on CNN one night. Oh, he was mad about the BP blowout. I saw Mr. Vitter. Boy, he was mad about it. I saw Mr. Jindal. Boy, he was mad about it. So I decided to write a little letter to the editor. Mr. Nungesser, you live in Plaquemine Parish. You're at ground zero of coastal erosion. Where have you been? Where have you been? You've let the coast erode. Katrina was much worse because we don't have any barrier islands. But you want to get on Anderson Cooper and scream with Bobby Jindal and David Vitter about how bad BP is. BP is minuscule compared to what happened to the coast in the state of Louisiana because our politicians hadn't had the guts to take up for the people. They've been in the back pockets of the big corporations that give them money. That's a fact. We have in Louisiana 55% of the white people in poverty. That's going to shake some of you folks. 55% of the people in poverty in Louisiana are white. 42% are black, and 3% are Hispanic. So you see, it's not just one segment of people causing the problem. We all got problems. We all have problems. And there are solutions, but you can't find the solutions with tap dancing politicians that are going to Washington with big checks that represent the big companies. That's the fact. They just won't do it. They'll give you the great speeches, and they'll do this and they'll do that, but when it gets down to it, they're going to do exactly what these big companies want. I want to ask you something today, and you ought to ask all these folks up here. It's a great saying that's in the country. You ought to ask all these politicians, before you start telling me what you're going to do, why don't you tell me what you've done? There you go. Before you tell me what you're going to do, why don't you tell me what you've done? Let me tell you what I've done. I've stood up for people. I'm not owned by the big companies, and I'm proud of it. Right here in Caddo Parish and Bossier Parish, you can look across. Some of you probably stayed over in Bossier. We have gaming facilities over there, a lot of them, 5 of them. Well, I did something a little bit different that's never been done in the state of Louisiana, and I don't think it's been done in the United States of America, and it's going to surprise you. When all the money came to Bossier City for gaming, I wouldn't let the politicians spend it. You know what I did with the school board? We saved it. Now I want you to listen to this real good. Bossier Parish today has $43 million in a trust fund for education. Now they're going to say, oh, Foster Campbell's against business and he's a liberal. I'm for people. I'm not ashamed of it. How could anything be more conservative than a trust fund for education where the money has to be spent in the classroom? Not one football, not one basketball, or one baseball. It has to be in the classroom. I made kids make better grades to play ball in Louisiana. When I went to the legislature, they could make 3 Ds and 2 Fs and play football at Fair Park or Byrd or Spring Hill or wherever, Opelousas or wherever. But I raised the standards. And they all told me, oh, you can't do that. You're going to make everybody mad. The truth is, and guess how much that costs? Not 1 penny. Raise the standards without costing a penny. The next thing I did when the tobacco settlement came along, now I want you to listen to this because it affects everybody in this room, all of you guys, wherever you live, you get money from this. Mike Foster was governor. I got along with him pretty good. Not the best, but pretty good. He's a good man. He wants you to do what he wants you to do now, but he was a good fellow. So anyway, here comes along Mike Foster and Bobby Jindal. Here's Bobby Jindal. He's the head of all the hospitals at that time. How you like that? Mike Foster made him head of DHH, all the public hospitals. Mike Foster said this: nobody makes people smoke. Nobody makes people smoke. Bobby Jindal's the head of all the public hospitals. You would think a man that is the head of all the hospitals would know about cancer of the lung, emphysema, heart problems, everything else, high blood pressure, wouldn't you? But Bobby Jindal wrote a letter to Richard Ayub saying, don't sue him. How you like that? I'll tell you a little bit. He didn't want to sue the oil companies about tearing up the coast either, but we'll get to that later. Anyway, we sued him. And I worked with Republicans and Democrats. I authored the bill called the Educational Excellence Fund, which was copied right after the Beef Fund in Bossier Parish. And guess what's in there today? $1 billion. $1 billion. Last week we gave, or 2 weeks ago, we gave out $25 million to schools that has to be used in classrooms. I did that with John Hankel. I think you live in St. Tammany. They got $1.6 million last week, and the money is in the classroom. It's not for a baseball. It's not for a football stadium. It's not for raising teacher salaries. It is for in the classroom instruction. No more conservative way to save money than a trust fund where you spend only the interest. I also, on the Public Service Commission, I have been a strong spokesman for the consumer. I made utility companies for battered women. And we have a lot of battered women in Louisiana. And I think it's disgusting. But most of these battered women are poor. They don't have a checking account, they don't have any cash, and they don't have a credit card. They're in a bad situation, trying to raise family with some man who's overbearing or whatever. I made the utility companies, if the lady lived in Shreveport and she wanted to move to Baton Rouge, I made Energy, let her move down there, and all the expenses of getting electricity, water, it's all free. I made the utility companies do that. I also sponsored a lot of bills for legislation on wildlife. I passed youth hunting days where you can take your children hunting a day before, a weekend before the regular season. I was the legislator of the year for the Louisiana Wildlife Association. This weekend, coming Thursday, I saw this in this paper this morning, the comeback of the black bear in Louisiana. I'm the guy that passed the black bear license plate. They're already sold 8,000 or 9,000. We've raised $500,000 for wildlife. I am the fellow that asked the railroads to do a little bit better. We have more accidents on railroads than any place in America. More people are getting killed here. I took on the railroads to try to help you and help the people of Louisiana have better safety at railroad crossings. If you see anybody with the railroads, if anybody gets killed, it's your fault. It's your fault, always. Let me give you a good example. Right over here in Bossier Parish, we have a main thoroughfare. And they stop it every day about 5 o'clock. And here was the railroad's attitude. You don't like it? Build an overpass. And guess what we did? The city of Bossier spent $18 million building an overpass because the railroad would not unstop this main artery at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So what I'm telling you is I don't have any tap dancing shoes. When people say they'll fight for you, I'll fight for you. I'll work with Republicans and I'll work with Democrats. But to hear everything has gone to hell in this economy today, now I don't want to point anybody out, but somebody said everything's gone to hell. I don't know if any of you guys ever bought any stock, but it hadn't all gone to hell. I knew when it went to hell in 2008. But if you've had any little money in the pocket, stock market's done pretty good. I'm in the cattle business. I sold some $1,400 calves. I don't know if that's gone to hell. So I hear all this gloom and doom, and that's what they want to get you scared about everything. It's all going to hell. That's not true. I believe in positive thinking. I want money in people's pocket. I can't sell insurance to anybody broke. I want to have people have money in their pocket. I want to raise the minimum wage. You cannot starve prosperity out of people. You can't do it. I know people can grab money and hold it. And my name is Campbell. I'm from Scotland. We're not bad about spending a lot of money. You can take this money and hold it and hold it and hold it and squeeze it and squeeze it and squeeze it, and guess what happens? It'll eventually leave. Now, if you invest that money, it grows money. So I've heard all the gloom and doom, and I know we've got some problems, but I know about 2008, when everything went down and nobody wanted to bail out anybody, let them all go broke. I don't buy that story. And he was talking about Jimmy Carter, how bad he was. I understand, I hear that. But the truth is, the guy teaches Sunday school every day on Sunday. So he's not a bad guy. You might not like him, but he's really a good, kind man, got a good heart. They don't ever say that. They just talk about how bad he was. But find these other presidents that you want to talk about and ask them what they do on Sunday. You can go to his Sunday school class every time. But anyway, you remember when Jimmy Carter bailed out Chrysler? Oh, Lord, we bailed out Chrysler. It was the worst thing. Guess what happened to Chrysler? They saved it. And we saved the jobs. And a lot of people now have a chance. Chrysler's one of the large companies. And a lot of people want to let them go broke. I have friends that will not buy a Chevrolet today because we bailed out General Motors. Now, how crazy is that? Will not buy a Chevrolet. I had one of my dearest friends, and I drive Fords. I drive anything as a bargain. But anyway, I've got a dear friend who was a bona fide, he loved Chevrolets. And he told me, a smart guy, he'd never buy another Chevrolet because the United States government bailed out General Motors. And I asked him, I said, now, how crazy is that? You mean to tell me you wanted them all go broke? Do you realize all the tires that Michelin or Firestone or whoever, they don't just have Chevrolet on them. They have Ford, Chevrolet, Chrysler. All those people who work the tire plant, you want to get rid of them too? So sometimes you got to use your head. You can't be scared into jumping off a cliff. I'm not going to jump off the cliff. I want to see what's down there. I want to see what's down there besides getting the news from Rush Limbaugh and him telling me how bad everything is. And he didn't vote till he was 30-something years old making $1 billion a year. So I'm a realist. I'm a conservative when it comes to money. I'm for strong national defense. I'm pro-gun, pro-life, and I'm the guy that wants to do something about the coast. Now tell me what senator in Louisiana has done more to talk about helping the coast. I couldn't find all the congressmen. I've written letter after letter, Mr. Vitter, Mr. Jindal, and even Mary Landry, Miss Landrew. I couldn't find them with a flashlight. You know why? I can tell you why. Because they didn't want to buck the big oil companies that write the big checks to get them reelected. And that's the fact. So let me just end by saying this. If you want to send a real fighter to Washington, I'm your guy. If you want to send somebody that's going to do a little tap dancing, don't vote for me because I don't have any. I don't want them. And let me tell you something else. You mean to tell me we had a lawsuit and none of these guys supported it last year? None of them. Nobody up here did. There was a lawsuit. Now, I'm a farmer. You all own property. I'm going to ask you one simple question. You have a house, okay? Somebody goes through your yard and tears it all to the devil, just tears it all up. You think you might ask somebody to pay for that? Well, of course you would. But now, last year, there was a lawsuit filed, and they said, oh, it was filed by the wrong venue, whatever. Oil companies were telling politicians what to say. Oh, it was a bad venue, blah, blah, blah. The levee board couldn't file that lawsuit. Well, anyway, there was a lawsuit filed to ask the oil companies to simply repair the coast that they tore up. And guess what Mr. Jindal and the legislature and the congressman did about that? Nothing. Mr. Jindal led the fight to repeal the lawsuit, to pass a bill to take the lawsuit out. Now, all any politician would have had to do was say, hey, I don't know if it's right or wrong, but let the court decide. A judge has got plenty of sense. If it's a frivolous lawsuit, he's going to kick it out. But no, not what Mr. Jindal had to do. Mr. Jindal and his guys in the legislature, y'all know I'm telling the truth, all ganged up and killed the lawsuit, retroactively killed the lawsuit. He's going to tell us what the judge can't do. So listen, I appreciate you listening to me, you're in my hometown. And first of all, I want to tell you thank you so much for coming to North Louisiana. I'm going to tell you a little story, and I'm going to lighten up things a little bit. You know, you might say I could preach. I can preach now. I'm a Baptist, you see. Now, don't ask me, do I like chicken? Now, if you do that, you're going over the top. Anyway, I don't know if you know this, but a long time ago, Arkansas and LSU used to play every year here in Shreveport. And it was a great game. And by the way, Fayetteville is about 300 miles, almost right in, Shreveport's almost in right in the middle between Fayetteville and Baton Rouge. So we used to have a big game here every year. It was the Arkansas LSU game, and people loved it. So I introduced a bill to get that back and passed it out of the Senate. But anyway, now you couldn't because they got all the facilities and it cost a lot of money. But I was on the radio down there, and the lady really amused me, said, Senator Campbell, this is for you South Louisiana folks, okay? This lady, she's in South Louisiana, and sometimes y'all think we live in Arkansas or Alaska, or wherever y'all do. But anyway, she said, Senator Campbell, I got a question for you. I said, okay, what is it? She said, you know how far it is from Baton Rouge to Shreveport? I said, yes, ma'am, I do. Well, what is it? I said, it's about the same distance from Shreveport to Baton Rouge. She started laughing, and she couldn't help it. She said, y'all drive down here every weekend. I said, that's right. And it is the same distance. I said, that's right. So she said, I think you're right. I said, thank you very much. Let me tell you something else I did, and I'm glad I did it. There's a lady down in Kisatchie National Forest. It's a big national forest. At a little place called Mink, Louisiana. You've never heard of it, but it's mink, like the animal. And so I was having public meetings all over the state, and I had one in Natchitoches. A lot of people showed up. And this lady is a lovely lady. Her name is Mrs. Bolton. She got up and she said, Commissioner Campbell. I said, yes, ma'am. I want to talk to you about something. I said, okay, Miss Bolton. She said, we want to talk to you about telephones. I said, well, she said, first of all, you kin to Dr. Campbell. I said, yes, sir. She said, he's been our doctor forever. I said, yes, ma'am. She said, I want to talk to you about phones. I said, what's wrong, Miss Bolton, with your phone? You don't have any, you got trouble on the line, or what's the problem? She said, no, Mr. Campbell, you don't understand. I have never had a phone. My neighbors have never had a phone since they invented phones. So I said, oh, Lord, I'm going to get you a phone. She said, that's what all politicians say. I said, I'm going to get you one. So I made the telephone companies. Now, this might make some of those regulation people mad. Don't be interfering. But I interfered. I interfered for Mrs. Bolton and about 30 people down at Mink. I made the utility companies give them a phone. And they got all hot, and they said, hey, you should have done it in the 50s. You knew about these people out there, and you didn't want to do it, Mr. Telephone Man, but we're going to do it. So we did it. So the first phone call she gets, Miss Bolton gets, is for Governor Blanco. And Miss Blanco is nice. She said, Miss Bolton, welcome to the world. She said, I'm so glad. Miss Bolton was just so happy. The next phone call she gets is from Regis. So Regis gets on the phone and says, Miss Bolton, this is Regis. She said, who? Regis Fleming. You know who? I've been on TV for 30 years. She said, hey, we don't have a TV either. Guess what? This is the truth. I went home the next morning, a friend of mine called me from Germany. Said, Foster. I said, what? Guess who's on TV in Germany? I said, I ain't got a clue who. You are. I said, what do you mean? Yeah, you're the hit over here in Germany. They're saying Louisiana finally gets telephones. So I've always had a saying that I've run since I work hard, talk straight, and I make sense. I can go to Washington and represent you. I won't be in anybody's pocket. I'm not going to be against people working. I'm for people working. And I'm in business. And I'm for people making more money. But if you don't remember anything I say, just remember this. There is no way in the world you can starve prosperity out of people. You just can't do it. The more money people can make, and if the businesses are doing good, the more money they spend. The more money they spend is we have better schools at Northwestern. We have better schools at Tech or LSU. Now listen, I supported John Bell Edwards. I was for him 100%. Raised him a bunch of money and wrote a lot of letters for him. He has encouraged me to run for the United States Senate. And I'm glad he has, and I'm taking him up on it. Now, you vote for who you want to. These are fine people. But if you don't vote for me, you're going to make a hell of a mistake. Thank you very much.
All right, I will try to speed it along. Before we started all of this, when we were in the back, Roland invited us to lunch and said it might be chicken, and that sounded pretty good right about now. So I appreciate everybody's patience and certainly appreciate all that we've heard today. As Guy said, my name is Caroline Fayard, and I am running for the United States Senate. Some of you may remember me because I ran for lieutenant governor back in 2010, but I've never held elected office before, and I'm not a career politician. I'm also not Bobby Jindal, but there was some waving saying towards his name. Though I didn't win that race, after campaigning for only 3.5 months, I got 43% of the votes. It was about 553,000 votes in all. After that race, a good friend of mine told me that in his opinion, Louisiana voters are values voters, meaning that they want to know that the person running for office shares their values on certain important issues. And if you can check those boxes, then they will open their ears, their minds, and yes, their hearts, and listen to what you have to say. I think my friend made a good point. So let me first start by telling you who I am and my values, which likely match many of your own. I'm a pro-life, pro-gun, pro-business conservative who was raised in Livingston Parish, specifically Denham Springs, though my people are from Springfield, Killian, and Marpaw, down in the southwest part of that parish. I'm not a liberal nor a socialist. Rather, I'm a happy capitalist, having built my own successful law practice and helping launch a regional airline based out of New Orleans called Glow, which actually flies to Shreveport right now. I'm a Catholic Christian woman who believes in God and always roots for the home team. I love America, and I love Louisiana, and yes, having been all around the world and all around this country, I know we are the best state in the Union, and this is the best place to live. And by the way, I'm a Democrat, but my family's a mixed bag. My grandfather was a Republican, and my other grandfather was an independent. I'm just not the kind of person to switch parties for political opportunity, even though I've been asked to do so in the past. Okay, now that those boxes have been checked, today I want to tell you why I'm here, and I'm going to tell you 3 things. Why I am here. I want to tell you why I'm running for the United States Senate, why this seat is so important, and why I'm the right person for the job. First, why I'm running for the United States Senate. In politics today, the insiders of the so-called political class try to dumb everything down. They try to pin labels on everyone, thinking voters are dumb. So let me be very clear and direct with you. I am running for this seat because it is a calling, not a career. With my Louisiana rearing and educational opportunities, I worked for one of the country's top investment banks and one of its best law firms. I could have stayed away from this state for a very long time. But I decided to come home and do what I can to make this state, our Louisiana, the place to be. Thank you. I want Louisiana to be a place that people like me and my little brother can stay and live forever. I want it for my children, and I want it for yours. We deserve better than the representation we have today, and we need actual results, not rhetoric. We deserve better than those who run on a platform of doing nothing and getting paid for the privilege, or keep running and running and running, always wanting anything but the job that they have. And when they get up there, they won't talk to anyone who doesn't share their views. They block, they tackle, they refuse to act on either side. And yes, both parties have failed us. But in Louisiana now, we have the opportunity to choose a new course. We and you have the the ability, and yes, some would say the obligation to look past party and political labels and choose the right person for the job, and now is the time. And you can, because in this America that we all love, you do not have to rely on party or the establishment to tell you who or what to vote for. No one is satisfied with the status quo, and yet in our political system, it seems the status quo always wins. It's like variations of the same old meal, like that scene in Forrest Gump with Bubba: boiled shrimp, barbecue shrimp, coconut shrimp, fried shrimp, shrimp cocktail, but it's all shrimp. If that is all you have been offered, then that is all you know. But just imagine, someday someone offers you something new, a steak. It tastes great, something new, something different, something you have never had before, a true choice. A chance to break from the status quo and do something new, modern, and fresh. You have that here too with this seat. We can start new and fresh and send the best of Louisiana up to Washington, D.C. With me, you will get a homegrown Louisiana senator who understands acutely that Louisiana is the greatest state in the country, but we aren't living up to our potential. With me, you will get a senator who knows this is the greatest country in the world, and indeed the greatest country that has ever existed. Anyone that is striking a tone of fear and that we aren't great and that we are on a cliff is lying to you. We have problems, yes, but we are the greatest country on earth. Can we improve? Yes, we can, and we will. But we are already improving upon the greatest democracy the world has ever seen. And you will have in me a senator who understands it is truly a privilege and not a right to represent the voters in this state, who will push your values and who will never forget you, your family, or your parish community. I will never forget who I'm working for and the challenges that we face. Now to my second point. Why is this Senate seat so important, this U.S. Senate seat? First off, the answer should be obvious. It is one of only 100 in the country. My job as your next United States Senator, and let me be real blunt with you all, is to start by getting to know and gaining the respect of 99 other people so I can work with them to produce results for you. I've got to talk to these people, whoever they are, and build a relationship with them so I can promote our state and get the results that we need. I've got to work with the president, whoever he or she is, and I will. I promise you, whoever he or she is, I will work with them to deliver results for you and your family. Let me tell you something. I worked for the last 6 years with my brother, Trey Fayard, to found a regional airline that's based in New Orleans and flies twice daily to Shreveport. We try to fly to Little Rock and Memphis, and we're also trying to expand to Fort Walton Beach. We want to bring transportation and jobs and opportunities to people, real jobs, real opportunities. You know who we have to deal with most of the time? The FAA. You know what that is? That's an agency of cabinet of the United States government. You know who controls it? The President of the United States, okay? You got to talk to people if you want to do business in this state. You got to talk to people. You can't just write them off or cross your arms, take your ball to the corner, be quiet and pout. Look, Louisiana is important. It's very important. We feed and fuel the nation. I mean, people talk about building a wall in presidential politics. I used to say this when I was running for lieutenant governor. We could maybe build a wall around Louisiana. Think about it. We'd be just fine. We'd eat really well. We'd dance. We have great music. And yeah, we'd be able to heat our homes and drive our cars anywhere we needed to go. The nation needs us. That's the point, folks. But we've got to get a fair deal from Washington. We need somebody who can negotiate well for us to bring home money, jobs, and investment here. We've always given so much to the country. Our oil and gas industries, our other industries, agriculture, tourism, our rivers, lakes, streams. But our people are worn out. Hurricanes, oil spills, a Gulf moratorium, the Red River flooding, roads, highways, and bridges in disrepair. An education system, as we've heard today, in various stages of decay. Our kids leaving and not coming back like I did. And a governor like Bobby Jindal, who destroys the state's finances to further his own political ambitions. It's time to get paid back. It's time to send someone to D.C. with the energy, integrity, and intelligence to negotiate well for our people and bring us some results. But that's not going to happen if we continue to vote for the same tired candidates again and again, particularly for those who run on a platform of doing nothing and getting paid for the privilege. Folks, people are not mind readers. If you aren't talking to people, then how are they going to know what you need and what you want? It's real easy to get those who agree with you to vote for what you need and what you want, but that's not how it works in Washington, D.C. You got to get those who may not agree 100% with you to be on your side too. And if you can't talk to them, then you certainly can't deliver. My third point, why I'm the right person for the job. In my business today, if I don't deliver results, I don't get paid. For anyone that you want to talk about lawyers, for all that anyone may say, I work on contingency fee. I advance all the costs and the expenses for all of my clients to give them a fair shake in court and their day against big corporations like the BPs of the world. But I don't make money until you do, if you're my client. So I know what it's like to have to deliver results to literally keep the lights on. And that, by the way, is a bill I pay myself and an office I run for myself. And yes, I ran 6 years ago and lost, but I didn't sit at home and pout and wait for the world to come to me. Because I'm not a complainer or a whiner. I'm a workhorse, not a show pony. And to this day, I know that Louisiana has given me a whole lot more than I could ever give it. And I know that I owe Louisiana and its people a lot more than they have ever owed me. I went right back at it after I lost. I built that successful law practice concentrating on making BP oil spill victims whole. I joined some community boards and nonprofits to give back. And I helped build that airline that connects the state and across the South, creates real jobs, and has a real plan of expansion for the future. Look, folks, we can't have someone who looks the same, talks the same, thinks the same, and acts the same as everybody else up there. We can't have any more bench warmers. This seat is too important. Louisiana is too important, and we are too important. It's time to send a doer to Washington and stop listening to the establishment. The establishment told us we shouldn't rebuild New Orleans or our coast. They told us we'd never get a settlement with BP. They told us not to drill in the Gulf, and they told us we'd never get glow in the air. But they are wrong. New Orleans is stronger than ever. There are many parishes that have BP money and are using it right now for urgent needs. We are producing oil and gas in the Gulf, and we will continue to do so, and there are planes in the sky today. As I close, please let me end on one personal note. It's probably something I should have said with y'all earlier. Besides, just thank you for letting me be here. My maternal grandmother, Rita Lazarevich Felder, worked for the Livingston Parish Police Jury for many years. In fact, she retired from there. She was an assistant secretary under Ms. Robbie Hill, and she spent her days answering the phones for the people of Livingston Parish in a suit and with a smile. She was an example to me and many others, and a fine woman. And so were those that she worked with on the ground every day doing the daily business of the people of Louisiana. So for me to be here speaking to her peers and people that were her colleagues by running for United States Senate would be more than she could have ever imagined for her granddaughter. And I think about her every day and try to make her proud. Thank you for listening to me. Thank you for all the work that you do. And remember, I'm running for this office because it is a calling, not a career. We need real representation in D.C., and I have a history of delivering results in difficult circumstances. And most importantly, I care about the people of our state more than anything. It would be an honor to be your next United States Senator. I expect to be held accountable, and you can expect results. I can't do it without you. I'll need your time, your help, your prayers, and yes, your vote, and I'm asking for all of them today. God bless you, your families, God bless Louisiana, and God bless our country. Thank you.
There is an election today. There's a primary for president, and I'm not going to tell you who to vote for. I'm not sure even myself, but I'll give you a tip. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to vote for the guy who promises the least. Therefore, I'll be disappointed the least when he actually gets into office. And that's really what I want to talk about today. Have you noticed oftentimes how politicians get elected and they suddenly develop amnesia? You notice that? I see a lot of heads nodding. Some of the things that you're dealing with every day, like failing roads and bridges, waterways, tributaries, coastal erosion, I know that you've heard the same promises over and over and over again, and yet Washington and Baton Rouge oftentimes fails to come through. But there's one thread that ties it all together, and that is a growing lack of resources, a growing lack of money over time in order to help fund these things. I'm tired of that too, just like you are. I'm tired of the promises. I'm tired of politicians not delivering on those promises. And as a result, I'm running for the United States Senate to represent you. Now, I got fed up with my own party. Now, I'm a conservative Republican, and I can tell you, those who are Republicans here today, we know that Democrats do what Democrats do. They tend to be liberal, and they tend to like bigger government. But I'm angry at my own party. I got fed up with my own party. I helped form the House Freedom Caucus last year. We came together and we forced change in the House. We shook up the House. We forced the Speaker of the House, John Boehner, to resign. The first time in history that a Speaker has resigned within the middle of his term without there being scandal or illness. It's time to fix our problems. And it's time that we send people who have Louisiana common sense solutions to Washington. Washington desperately needs that. And why am I the person that can do this? Well, I was born in a working class home. At age 14, I said, you know, I need to make a little extra money. So I decided I would open a little lawn mowing business because I was too young to get a regular job. And I went to my dad and I said, Dad, I want to start cutting grass for neighbors around here and make a little bit of money, but I said, all we got's a clunker. I can't get this thing started. He said, no problem. He takes me down to the loan company. He co-signs a note for me to buy the lawnmower, but he makes me pay for it out of the proceeds of my little business. But that's not all. He then has me mow his grass for free. Now, Donald Trump has nothing on my dad, I can assure you. But then after that, during the middle school years and during my high school years, I worked a number of earning wage or minimum wage jobs. And I was so glad and felt so blessed to have those. But you know what? Just before I was leaving for college, I was prepared to go to college. My dad died suddenly at age 43 of a heart attack. And there I was without the resources in order to accomplish that. He left my mom, who was disabled, and my little brother and sister, and we had to figure out a way to solve these problems. We were problem solvers. And what I did is I worked part-time during the school year. I worked during the summers. I worked whenever I could to make a little extra money in order to work my way through college. I even cut my college a year short, even though I had enough credits and ended up getting a degree. But I went to college a year less just to save the money because I barely had enough to get through. Well, I got accepted to medical school, and guess what happened? I ran out of money again. So I appealed to the United States Navy, and they gave me a Navy scholarship, and they paid my way through. In exchange for that, I served in uniform very proudly and was privileged to do so for 6 years, stationed in such places as Guam. I remember vividly having to deliver babies in what we call a hurricane. They call them typhoons out there. It was very, very interesting and very challenging. But you know, that first job, the one with the lawn mowing and then later with the minimum wage, taught me many things because when I got out of the Navy and I came to Minden, a little town near Shreveport, back in 1982, I put all of that to good use. I opened up a medical practice, and then a few years later, I opened up a non-medical business that created 500 jobs that exist even today for Louisianans, and I'm so proud to do that. But that common American story that I lived, it seems to be fading for many today. And why is that? Because instead of government making things easier for us, it seems to be making things tougher for us. We here in Louisiana understand the importance of local control in making decisions. Our system of police juries here in Louisiana is unique in our country because it is intended to place control as close to citizens as possible. But the federal government, with its onerous regulations, has made it increasingly more difficult. The structure of government in both Washington and Baton Rouge means that all power has become centralized, And when your money that's taxed from your areas goes up to Washington and Baton Rouge, it's siphoned off, isn't it, when it comes back down to you? And that's a huge problem. I'm a big believer in the 10th Amendment to the Constitution, what we call federalism. That means that government close to the people is more efficient and governs best. And so in your case, I would suggest that we need to reform things in Baton Rouge. Give the decision-making to you, give you the taxing authority, and let you decide where that money goes, rather than always sending it to Baton Rouge. And you know what? We need to do that with the federal government as well. One of the biggest problems, and you heard Foster Campbell talk a moment ago about how Louisiana is so poor, and it is, and we need to do more things for more people. But you know what? Our budget in 1965 was 32% mandatory spending. And what is mandatory spending? That's welfare programs, all the sort of entitlement programs, Section 8, food stamp, and so forth. Today, that has doubled. In fact, it's nearly 70% today. And you know what? We barely touch poverty. We have not improved our lot, even though we're eating up our budget completely by sending dollars out to people in the form of benefits. And that makes it more and more difficult for us to provide to you the necessary dollars and resources to make it possible for you to do your jobs. And then on top of that, we have another huge problem that I know you know about. Under this current administration, we've had a huge number of new regulations that are extremely damaging. Let's look at the Biggert Waters Act and the fact that flood insurance rates have skyrocketed. Now, we have a 3-year moratorium on that, and hopefully we're going to fix that permanently, but there's nothing yet guaranteed in law that's going to fix those huge increases. We need a permanent solution that does the following. It ensures for Louisianans that, number one, we're able to afford what they purchase, that when they buy a house, it is affordable, that they're not going to be punished for the improvements that they put on that property, and finally, that they can actually sell it when they get ready to do so. Let's talk about Obamacare, the President Obama's health care mandate system. What has it done? Well, first of all, it's killed hundreds of thousands of jobs. It steals over $700 billion from Medicare, and it puts heavy regulations on small businesses that are increasing the cost of health care. Now, I got to tell you, folks, yes, it's true that small businesses are really under the gun at this point, but they're not the ones that hurt the most. It's the employees. It's the people that work for businesses, and I can tell you that this destruction of jobs and also converting full-time jobs to part-time jobs because of the 30-hour mandate is extremely toxic, and I would say is the most dangerous thing in this economy today. That's increased to 68%. It's doubled. It's eating our budget alive, and within 10 years, it will be 78% of our federal budget. That means only 22% of the budget left for what you guys do with waterways, erosion, bridges, roads, highways, all of that would come out of that slim 22%, and national defense. And as you know, our national defense has been tremendously squeezed over the last few years. We're no longer able to defend at the same level that we had commitments only a few years ago. Well, what about reforming welfare? Doesn't it make sense that we ask people who are capable of working to return back to work? And we should make it an opportunity for people through training or whatever opportunities that we can provide for them, the ability to get those jobs and keep those jobs. You know, President Clinton and a Republican Congress put work requirements into welfare back in the 90s, and President Obama took them back out again. And as you would expect, the welfare rolls have swelled. Food stamps have increased by 50%. So it's pretty obvious that as we have increased the welfare state, as we've increased mandatory spending and entitlements, as we're gobbling up our entire budget and spending it on benefits, the economy has only gotten worse. Our economic growth has not exceeded 2% in any year over the last 10 years. Well, I can tell you as a physician and as a business owner who is greatly affected by Obamacare, the first thing I'm going to do when I'm elected to the Senate is to force a repeal of Obamacare lock, stock, and barrel, and send it to a Republican president to finally be signed. We're going to reform Medicaid. We're going to send it the dollars, the same dollars, to each state and tell the states, you decide how to spend those Medicaid dollars for the poor, because the one-size-fits-all that comes from Washington is a disaster. But most importantly, we want to protect those who need to be protected. We need to protect Social Security, we need to protect Medicare and the people who are on them, or people who are even close to being on those at some point. But finally, if we don't do the right thing here and begin reforming these programs, you're not going to have the money to do your job and answer to your constituencies, and we'll no longer be able to help those who are elderly and vulnerable. Energy. As you know, we're a powerful energy state. But look what's happened just in recent days. The president cut a deal with Iran, gave them the $150 billion that was tied up, which they can now use for state-sponsored terrorism, and allowing them to dump their oil on the world market at absolutely the worst time in history. Instead of the federal government telling us how to spend our money, it's time those resources come back to Louisiana projects. And we need to complete many of these projects that I know you're working on, such projects as the Morganza to the Gulf and the St. Charles Hurricane Protection System. Basically, we need to let you make decisions, but we need to give you the ability to make taxing decisions at the local level. And you know, there are many states that are bigger than us that have smaller budgets than we do, because that's precisely what they do, and it works. Back again on regulations for a moment. The REINS Act, we passed that out of the House, but it's not yet law. What does it do? It requires an act of Congress to approve a regulation that has any serious impact on the economy. So you see, taxes are not the only thing that are damaging to our economy and to businesses and therefore jobs, but regulations function just like a tax. In 1974, Ronald Reagan gave his famous Shining City Upon a Hill speech, in which he said the following: "We cannot escape our destiny, nor should we try to do so. The leadership of the free world was thrust upon us in that little hall in Philadelphia." Ladies and gentlemen, we, the United States, we're the best hope of mankind. But it begins with the people, not government. It begins here at the local level, not in Washington. It begins with Louisiana common sense and not Washington insanity. I believe in an America that still is that hope for the world and for the future. But we must once again regain our greatness. That begins with returning our economy to its leadership position and returning economic power back to the local level. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much, and God bless you. And remember me in November. I'm your next United States Senator, and God bless. My message here is that Washington is out of control. It's not sending the funds, the resources back to the states and the locales necessary for bridges, for highways, for coastline protection. And it's time that Washington begin to send that power and that authority, including taxation, down to the people where people can make those decisions best.
What do you see as the most important issue in the U.S. Senate that affects local government here in Louisiana?
Well, I would say there's a number of them, but one of the most immediate ones is the waters of the U.S., which is a redefinition of navigable waterways, which in essence makes almost the whole state of Louisiana federal territory, requiring a federal permit and even mitigation. We've got to put a stop to that. But there are many other damaging regulations, everything from Obamacare to flood insurance. All of these things need to be either fixed or stopped along the way.
I'm telling people all across the state of Louisiana that we need somebody in Washington to fight for the people of the state of Louisiana who is not controlled by big business. I have a record second to none for taking up for consumers, from taking on the payday loan companies to taking on astronomical cost for 40,000 prisoners' families when they have to use telephones, to fighting utility companies, telling them they make too much money in Louisiana, and I've been a real proponent of doing something about coastal erosion. I'm amazed to see that all the politicians, want to jump around and holler about BP, how bad it was. Well, it was bad, but it's nothing like losing our coast. Where are these guys been when we talk about losing the coast? I'll tell you where they've been. They've been in the pockets of the big oil companies and big chemical companies who write the big checks. I'm not in anybody's pocket. I have a record 40 years of serving people. I'm very proud of it. I've established a $43 million trust fund in Bossier Parish from gaming revenues for schools. $1 billion trust funds from the tobacco settlement for schools. No one has ever created $1 billion trust fund for schools. Last month, we gave out $25 million to the local schools, charter schools, Catholic schools all across the state. An example, Caddo Parish here got $1.6 million. St. Tammany got $1.3 million. St. Landry, a small parish, got $260,000, and it went on and on and on from that. So I have been for the people, and I have a record to prove it. That's what we need in Washington, somebody that's not afraid to stand up.
What is the biggest issue in the U.S. Senate that affects local government in Louisiana?
Having somebody to go up there that can get along and stopping this craziness that David Vitter and Bobby Jindal has, this isolationist, all this, their theory, their way or the highway. Louisiana's a poor state. 45% of the people in Louisiana live in poverty, and they're up there philosophically against everything, trying to push their agenda rather than taking care of the people of the state of Louisiana.
I think it comes down to safety and security of the country, but also getting the resources that we need to make Louisiana strong. Our roads, our bridges, our flood protection, rebuilding our coast, and continuing to fight for good Louisiana jobs, particularly protect those industries such as agriculture and oil and gas that we're fighting for today.
What separates you from the other candidates in the race?
Well, there's probably a lot of things that separate me. Some of them are more visible than others. I'm not a career politician. I've never held elected office before, but I'm an entrepreneur, a small businesswoman, a lawyer, and I care about the state of Louisiana.